Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic holiday season. I certainly am. And if you're watching this on the 24th, there's actually a pretty good chance that I'm going to be live on Twitch right now. RCK, the new pickup for the Dallas Fuel, is going to be on stream with me, and we're going to be talking about off-tanks, trying to learn a little bit more about D.Va and Zarya, and then on Boxing Day, we're going to have Yeatle returning to the stream to help me kind of get better at Hammond. So the response to the video with Funny Astro teaching me Lucio kind of gave me a lot of high hopes for a new series where instead of just kind of doing VOD reviews of various heroes, I bring on pros or other very notable players of specific heroes, and they teach me how they play their hero. So we'll get perspectives of both how to play it in solo queue as well as how to play it in ranked. So again, the 24th, starting at 11 a.m. Pacific, we'll have RCK on the stream, and then 26th at the same time, we'll have Yeatle. So look forward to that. But anyway, today is Mailbox Monday, so I've got my handy dandy phone here. I'm gonna be going through the questions, picking the best, and answering them to the best of my abilities. So let's get started. First question coming in from Oceans. Oceans asks, do you have any tips on being more consistent in team ult tracking as a Grandmaster main tank? I already learned how to ult track their team on the fly, but I need more tips in being consistent since this meta is chaos, so I'm not looking for basic tips. Now, if you're looking for actual advanced tips on ult tracking, there's not a lot of much that I can tell you beyond the fact that you need to be bringing your team into the process itself. Normally, when you're talking about how actual high-level teams do ult tracking, it's not just one individual, but it's a team effort. Normally, you have one person starting the conversation, and that conversation can be started by something as simply as saying, okay, what ults do they have? So sometimes ult tracking doesn't fall down to a singular person, and this can happen especially if your team doesn't have anyone who is extremely talented in ult tracking. If you are the sole individual doing that ult tracking, then you can say the ults that you are quite sure about, and then turn the ones that you are unsure about into a conversation. You won't be able to do this kind of mid-fight, but when you have 5 or 6 seconds, you can usually do this. And the more important thing is to train and educate your teammates so that they know when they fed an individual quite a lot of ult charge, that they let the team know that. For example, if your D.Va got into a duel with a high charge Zarya and just barely won that, but fed that Zarya quite a bit of ult charge, especially if they were getting healed while taking that duel, then the Zarya is going to be way closer to Graviton than you could ever estimate. And if that happened off of your screen, there's no way that you could properly incorporate that into your ult tracking estimate. The second thing is that if you get a tank really low, but then they escape, you have to take that into consideration when talking about the enemy's support ult charge. And this is also going to change, if you see who's healing it, any of all that fun stuff. But the thing with ult tracking is if you want to get to a much more advanced level, the whole saying 6 sets of eyes, 6 sets of ears comes back into play here. You can only see so much. And there's a lot of things that estimation just cannot do. Estimation can get you, a pretty fair ways, especially if you participate in the fights, but it won't get you all of the way. For that, ult tracking does need to become an actual team job. Next question coming in from Zepturn. Zepturn asks, how do I get better at focusing on one thing to improve on at a time and not thinking about several things to improve on at once? So there's a couple different ways that you could look at this. The first one is that for the vast majority of people, some pros included, the main thing that they do to practice for competitive, for tournaments, whatever, is to just play competitive. And the thing is, when you're playing in competitive, you're getting the full experience. You're getting team composition, you're getting scouting, you're getting swaps, you're getting game sense requirements, you're getting mechanical requirements, you're getting the full-blown Overwatch experience. And there's a lot of pieces to playing Overwatch at the high level competently. So if you are the kind of person who just practices in competitive, which is pretty much a euphemism for just mindlessly grinding competitive, then there are going to be a lot of things that present to you that you need to correct. There's just simply so many factors at play, it's impossible for you to isolate just one and work on it. And this is where dedicated and focused practice comes in. If you're talking about improving, for example, your McCree mechanics, then in order to improve your McCree mechanics, you would get a lot more benefit from playing McCree in something like Deathmatch. That would still allow you to work on your positioning, your movement, your mechanics, all of these factors, and you will be practicing them in a much more condensed period of time. This is also the reason why aim trainers are so effective. when you think about an actual competitive game, what percentage of that time are you actually spent aiming? For example, when you're playing Widowmaker in ranked, especially with so many barriers around, you're going to have to, not only work on aim, but also figuring out kind of hook shots, flank shots, and fend off flankers and things like this. You don't really get to practice what you yourself want to work on, which is where dedicated practice comes in, that you want to change whatever skill it is you want to work on from maybe like a 10 to 20% of the time you're doing that in competitive to a 90, 100% of the time you're doing that in a single block of 1 hour practice. Next question is coming in from Madi. Madi asks, you always say that Moira's kit is not very attractive. If you were a developer with total freedom to rework the character, what would you change about her? Oh, this is an interesting question. Now, normally I don't answer questions like these because I'm a coach and I'm a competitive individual, so I don't usually take issue or care or put too much thought into the actual rules of the game. For a person in my position, the rules of the game are set in stone, and that means the balancing. If something is kind of really broken, either if it's really overpowered, well, I'm going to spend more time learning about that because it's going to give me a competitive advantage in order to win. And if something is underpowered, then I'm probably not going to touch it simply because I don't care about it, because it's not going to help me win, or it makes the process of winning much more difficult. So I'll obviously be able to kind of recognize what's overpowered and what's underpowered and use that and exploit it effectively, but actually kind of knowing what or suggesting what should change in order to make the game more balanced is not something that I usually do. Theory crafting is also just inherently inaccurate. Think about the patch notes that heralded the start of that 7-month Mercy meta that everyone absolutely despised were heralded as the changes that everybody wanted. The fixes to Mercy have finally arrived. Ding dong, the witch is dead. And little did people know at that point in time that Mercy had simply become stronger than she had ever been before. So theory crafting, not just for me, but for basically the vast majority of the competitive community, is inaccurate. So whatever I suggest might be inherently overpowered or completely bloody useless. So the two things in Overwatch that I think really make a good character is utility and interactivity. Now, for utility, you want to do something that isn't just numbers. So isn't just heal, isn't just damage, isn't just base health pool. Things like that. That's a very easy way of doing things. That's a very simple way of doing things, and you are going to need some characters that just heal, just damage. They're simple, and they do have their place within a balanced game ecosystem. However, when you have utility, what utility allows you to do is alter the effects of other things or have a dramatically disproportionate impact onto the game. So if you think about Sleep Dart's damage is 5. It does 5 damage, that's all it does. But of course, it's a stun, it's a hard CC for 6 seconds long, and that 5 damage, if you will, has way, way, way more impact than any of Moira's healing. So the presence of that on a Sleep Dart, for example, is allowing a much higher skilled player the potential to outplay the opponents. Whereas if you have an equally skilled player on a character like Moira, their skill ceiling, their ability to use their utility to clutch or have a disproportionately large amount of impact on the game just simply does not exist on a character like Moira. So that's the first thing. There's not a lot of creativity in Moira's kit. She's very much heal, damage, nothing else. And you can't really outplay a person on Moira. Cue all of the Moira mains being angry at me about, using orbs and fades successfully. Like, yeah, you can do that, but it's simply not there to the level that you can do it on a character like Genji, on a character like Ana, etc. The second part of character design that makes characters good, in my opinion, is interactivity. This is one of the reasons that I usually hate Widowmaker. I don't like her very much in solo queue. In pro play, there's ways to work around her that are very effective, which is why you don't see Widowmaker very much in pro play. But Widowmaker, there's very, very few characters that can actually interact with her. And what I mean by that is the fact that she's got an unlimited fall-off range. So as long as she has the sightline, she has the ability to interact with you, meaning shoot you in the face, and you don't have the ability to interact with her in any meaningful ways. This causes you to have to kind of use other concepts, such as terrain, game sense, positioning, in order to play around her, and you can't actually kind of experience a direct engagement, a direct duel. So that can be extremely frustrating for people. Widowmaker also has shades of being a win more hero. And a win more hero is a hero that really kind of struggles to turn around a losing fight or a losing game, but makes a winning fight an absolute snowball of a disaster. So when you think about, for example, dive versus dive, if you have one team that has a Widowmaker and the other team that does not, in the actual process of taking and commanding space around the map, Widowmaker doesn't really help with that. But now this is going to be a simplified explanation, so please don't jump at this. There's a lot of if then but this because of, there's a lot of asterisks on this next kind of statement. But when you have the matchup between two different dive teams, one that has a Widowmaker and one that does not, assuming that the team that does not have the Widowmaker has a DPS or some other sort of character that helps them control, take, command space around the map, if the team that has the Widowmaker is able to give that Widowmaker the space required for her to operate and keep her safe without the assistance of Widowmaker in order to actually have done that in the first place, then the team was probably going to win regardless of the Widowmaker, even though the Widowmaker is kind of that big, beefy gun, that kind of exclamation mark at the end of the sentence that really kind of makes it impossible for the enemy team to actually kind of fight back into the game. Now, this is a really long-winded answer for a question that was originally about Moira, and there's other reasons why I don't like Moira. For example, her inability to interact with teammates past a certain range, as well as the tendency for heroes like Moira and Mercy in order to mask the mistakes of lower ranked players because those players get a ton of heals. One of the very, very common issues that I see in Platinum all the time is that a Winston, for example, or a Winston Diva, if a team is trying to play dive composition, they get a lot of their mistakes with playing proper dive, which is a difficult concept. It's kind of no shame to not being able to play dive properly in Platinum or Diamond. A lot of these tank players in that elo wrongly assume that they need more healing because they're taking too much damage. They think Lucio Zenyatta is not a good healer composition because it doesn't have enough healing to keep them up in the fights. When they're engaging poorly, they have bad positioning, etc., etc. So there's a lot of reasons that I don't like Moira. Her lack of utility, certainly one of them. She doesn't really have that outplay potential, as well as at the lower elos, she masks quite a few errors for both the Moira player and the tank players that she plays with. Next question is coming in from Ravage. Ravage asks, Jayne, I feel like I suffer from consistency issues with my aim, but anytime I might play with my sensitivity a bit, it feels significantly better and I can confirm kills easier. But when I adjust, it seems to degrade again. Is there any advice? Just leave my DPI sensitivity alone and focus on muscle memory more than aiming? What do I do? So this is a little bit of an interesting one. Now, in a game like CSGO, where there's less diversity in the characters that you're playing, there's kind of a more reasonable range of accepted sensitivities. But in a game like Overwatch, when you have different playstyles, different heroes, things like Tracer, which needs to kind of be like whipping her camera around, same with Genji, compared to heroes kind of like Widowmaker and Ashe. These characters sometimes have to do a 180 if they get into duels that were unfavorable for them. But simply put, some characters are very useful with a high sensitivity, relatively, and other characters are more useful with a lower sensitivity. You have these two different trade-offs. The first one is going to be between stability and speed, and the other one is going to be between accuracy and acquisition. And when you're talking about these concepts, it's not just your sensitivity that makes a difference here. It's also your technique. So your aim technique is actually something that I don't really see talked a lot about. Whether you're a wrist aimer, whether you're an arm aimer, a hybrid fingertip, palm, claw, all of these different kind of mouse grips. So just to give you an idea of what I'm trying to do in my own personal play, I play on an EDPI, so effective dots per inch, that's what EDPI stands for, of about 3,200. Now 3,200 is pretty low. If you're watching this video, there's probably like 99% of you guys have a higher sensitivity than me. It's really low. So if you want to figure out what your effective dots per inch is, or your EDPI is, you take the DPI of your mouse, if you're not sure what that is, Google it for the brand of mouse that you use, times your in-game sensitivity. So for an actual EDPI of 3,200, what I have is a 400 DPI on my mouse, as well as a 8 in-game sensitivity, or at least I had, and this sensitivity was really good for arm aiming. Now, arm aiming with a palm grip means that my fingertips aren't engaged, my wrist is a little bit engaged if I'm trying to be like precise aiming. Precise aiming happens at the wrist, and for kind of turning around and acquiring targets, it happens at the arm level. And when you are doing like a palm grip with an arm aiming style, it's extremely smooth. And if you've seen my gameplay or any of the VODs where I'm playing Overwatch, I get that comment a lot, that my aim just looks so smooth. And it's because my sensitivity is so low that my arm is literally moving around my desk. I could not possibly whip my mouse around faster unless I was having a seizure or something like that. So it's both very stable and very accurate. But the problem is that it's both slow in the fact that actually moving my mouse from A to B requires moving my entire forearm and sometimes my upper arm, which is a lot of mass. It's hard to accelerate compared to a higher sensitivity where you could just flick your mouse at 1,000,000 miles an hour using your fingertips. So it was accurate because I could get to targets pretty precisely due to the low sensitivity. A larger motion in real life is a smaller motion in-game, which allows you to be more precise. However, the actual speed of getting my mouse onto the target, really low. And as well, if a target was around me, like jumping around my head like a Genji, actually acquiring that target became very difficult, especially if you're getting to the point where you have to do multiple mouse lifts. Not only is the actual motion slower, but each time you have to lift and recenter your mouse, it also slows down the process even farther. I was really far at one extreme with super stable, super accurate settings. And by settings, I mean technique, both in the way that I was physically aiming with my actual resets, as well as my arm plus my palm grip. What I'm currently trying to do is transition to a more of a claw grip. So what I'm trying to do is I've moved up to an EDPI of 4,000, so 400 DPI and 10 in-game. Now the reason that I've done this is I want to find this more middle ground. That's a low enough sensitivity that I can still look around myself with the arm, but it's going to be a little bit faster. But in terms of quicker motions at a higher sensitivity, my fingertips are going to actually be able to play into it, and I can do much quicker corrections. The downside of this, of course, that my aim is a lot less stable and I have to relearn how to track. But I really did think that kind of my speed of acquisition was one of the things that was really hurting my gameplay. So it's one of the things that I'm changing about my technique to see if it helps. So, long story short, sensitivity isn't everything. If you're just worrying about sensitivity, you probably haven't taken into considerations which heroes you're playing. Because if you're playing two different sensitivities, it could be either placebo effect entirely, it could be inherent to the actual characters you're playing, or it could be a problem with your actual sensitivity. If this is the first time you've ever heard about EDPI or DPI, first thing IOStuck's put out a very, very long and detailed video series about finding your proper sensitivity and mouse techniques and aiming, so check that out. But secondly, if you're just looking for some generic guidelines, most professional players have between 4,000 and 8,000 EDPI. So EDPI, again, in-game sensitivity times the DPI of your mouse. 4 to 8,000 is usually, did I say 4 to 8,000 or 4 to 6,000? We'll just go with 4 to 8,000. It is 4 to 6,000 though. So if I recall, the average sensitivity amongst pro players is between 4 and 6,000. You do have people like Jonak who are way lower and use a DPI switch, which is a different topic I'm not going to get into. And then you also have people who are higher. Once you're getting above the 10,000 EDPI range, the number of professional players who use that sensitivity is very few. I think Geguri and Who Are You are, or is it Haksal? Can't remember off the top of my head, but they use above 10,000 and significantly above 10,000 EDPIs in professional play. If this is you, the highest sensitivity of an individual who I coached was 136,000. They were a silver Junkrat player, and yeah. So if you're sitting there and you do the math and you're like, wow, I'm sitting at like 30,000 or 40,000 EDPI, and then you're trying to justify this to yourself by saying, oh no, but it works for me, my aim is fine. No, it doesn't. Change it. Like, don't be that person. If your sensitivity is above probably like 12,000 EDPI, it's too high. You will see a dramatic improvement in your ability to play the game, assuming you have the desk space and the mouse pad in order to actually make use of those changes. If you do have pretty generous desk space. If you want to kind of like rip the bandage right off and go to a sensitivity and a setting that is like really competitive, go edge to edge of your mouse pad. So if you start your mouse on the leftmost side of your mouse pad and you move to the rightmost side of your mouse pad, that should be just over one 360-degree revolution, because from center, doing just a flick to near the edge of your mouse pad, you want to at least be able to do 180 degrees. Settings that go much higher, much lower than that kind of like general recommended. Save that for when you actually know what you're doing. Next question coming in from Weirep. Weirep asks, how much to hire you for a coaching session? For a team? I've got one of those. And that team doesn't take it too kindly when I start working with other teams privately. So unfortunately, I am unavailable for private coaching. I don't do it for individuals either. I prefer the system of lottery just because this is going to sound narcissistic, but with the demand that I would have, the price would be unreasonable and I wouldn't feel comfortable asking that of anyone. My coaching is not that much better than anybody else's that I would command such a price. There's private coaches in the past who have tried to offer these sort of services, IOStux and Wizard Hyung, both of them. But the cost for like a single 1 hour session with them was getting into like the $70, $80 range, which is, no, I'd prefer to just spend my time producing content that can help a lot of people at once instead of just helping one person. So I apologize, but I don't offer private coaching right now. Hope you enjoyed. If you do want to submit a question of your own, join the Discord. The link is in the description below, and check out the Ask Jayne channel. I'll take the best questions that we get all week and then answer them probably once a week. Happy Monday. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. Bye now.